Hello, everybody, and we are back here on the Dbacks podcast, Arizona's #1 baseball and beverage podcast. And somewhat appropriately today, we are talking tea with a little bit of honey, if you know what I'm talking about. I'm, of course, talking about the B delay that took place at Chase Field last night in Game 2 of the Dbacks-Dodgers series. Pretty unique scenario. You've seen it a couple of times if you've ever watched those MLB oddities compilations on YouTube. You'll have seen the thing. It might have been at Dodgers Stadium, I think, where a swarm of bees kind of gathered in the outfield and they had to get the spray out, and it's kind of worked on that clip, but then they ended up getting just a sac fly being hit out to kind of just right of center field, which I think it was the third out, and somebody made the play, but they were kind of swatting at the bees the whole time they were out there. Fortunately, that didn't happen at Chase Field yesterday night, and it is yesterday night for those of you listeners like me, if you watch the game from basically 3 o'clock in the morning here in London. The swarm of bees gathered kind of on the netting up behind home plate, so obviously quite a lot of fans are sat there. It's not like it was near the bullpen or anything like that. So the game was delayed, and they brought in a specialist pest control guy, who's just been labeled B guy by pretty much everyone in the Diamondbacks community. And he sorted it out. Took just under an hour, and he got to take the first pitch as well, having left their kids' t-ball game in the first inning, last game of the season, to come and basically get rid of some bees at Chase Field. So, shout out to B Guy for sorting that out. So, yeah, appropriately, we've got some iced tea here with a little bit of honey in it as our beverage for the episode. So what about, actually baseball? This is what that podcast's actually about. Let's actually talk the baseball. Game 2 against the Dodgers. Well, most notably, I think if you were one of the fans looking at that stadium, everyone was there for Shohei Ohtani. Everybody wants to see him in that Dodgers uniform. But, he went 1 for 4 and he got an absolutely filthy strikeout off of Joe Manaply. So there you go, Joe Manaply, where's he been all this time? Like all-star in 2022, and now, striking out Shohei Ohtani for the D-backs in a bullpen game. And we won a bullpen game, strangely enough. And it wasn't supposed to be a bullpen game. Jordan Montgomery was supposed to start. So if you were one of those guys who wanted to see him in a Serpientes uniform, I've seen a few people on X or Twitter saying they wanted to see him and they didn't get the chance. Yeah, he would have played yesterday, but no, we went for a bullpen game instead due to the fact that it was, almost 2 hours from when he was getting warmed up before the game to when the game actually began. But yeah, bullpen game. Bullpen actually did okay. Looking up at our pitching, it's a bit of a contrast with yesterday, where the bullpen was terrible. It was an 8-4 loss in Game 1 against the Dodgers. Tommy Henry gave up 5 hits. Sol Frank gave up a hit for 4 runs, and just terrible all the way around. But we did okay in the pitching yesterday. Hughes came in, struck out Mookie Betts, who was the leadoff hitter for the Dodgers in the first. It's the first time Mookie Betts has been struck out in 2 weeks, which is pretty cool to see. A very inexperienced pitcher coming in and running that first inning and doing okay. Scott McGough came in. He was the one who earned the win. He got a 6.43 ERA, which is good to see. Bryce Jarvis came in, ran the second and the third, looked pretty solid. Got strikeouts there on Betts and Ohtani. So I think the bullpen's come under a lot of fire, a lot of criticism recently. It's always been a bit of an area of a weakness for this D-backs team, but clearly Lovello is coaching some resilience and some mentality into them, which is exactly what they need. The fact that all of our pitchers seem to be having elbows and shoulders and biceps and all sorts of horrible injuries just exploding out of their bodies at the moment. That clearly can't help, but it's improving. We're getting there, so we'll see how that ends up turning out. I think it's Miguel Castro who's on the IL now. Ryan Nelson's on the IL. Erod, we haven't seen him yet. But so yeah, Salfrank came in to replace Castro a couple of games ago. Looked okay. It's not quite the Salfrank we were used to seeing in the NLCS or the World Series. It was not exactly throwing his best stuff, but we've brought in a few people brought up from AAA Reno. Like Slade Tichoni, he looks like somebody who really could settle into the majors pretty quickly. And then Brandon Pfaadt, who thought he'd probably be starting the year as maybe the number 5 guy in the rotation, maybe the number 4. He's pretty much our third starting pitcher now, and he's looking good. We're getting NLCS against the Phillies kind of Brandon Pfaadt. So, it's not all doom and gloom in the pitching department. I'm going to choose to take a pretty optimistic perspective on that. But yeah, like I said, Torey Lovullo is maybe coaching not so much a no fear attitude, because you've always got to, be professional and understand that, some guys can come in and no matter what you throw at them, they're going to be able to get a hit out of there. Like, Mookie Betts and Shohei Ohtani, Freddie Freeman, that's a good leadoff 3 batters. But, we kept some fairly quiet last night. So it just goes to kind of show that, these guys can be struck out. You can throw pitching. Ohtani got caught looking a couple of times. He was 1 for 4, I think, at the end of the night. So, they are human at the end of the day, regardless of how many times the guys over at John Boy Media want to go and say, Shohei Ohtani, he looks like a superhero in that Dodgers uniform. No, you can strike him out. And if you make your right decisions, play your game, and just don't worry about who you're throwing it to, it's doable. So I'm not expecting tremendous amounts of fireworks or success in the rest of the series. We'll just have to see. There's another game tonight, or this morning, if you're going to be like me watching it from London. Starts 2:45 in the AM. I'm not loving mountain time for that, but we'll be there. But yeah, game 2 against the Dodgers was, I would say, very much a success. And we beat LA, and it was interesting to see a lot of the guys in the stadiums with the beat LA signs and the flags and stuff, which we kind of picked up during the postseason last year. But we've really seemed to have adopted that slogan and that chant from the Giants fandom now. And if you're a Giants fan and you're listening to this, thank you for loaning us a very cool slogan. There's now a sticker of it on the back of my laptop. So yeah, we'll take it. We beat LA. We didn't get swept as well, despite the fact that there's a lot of other stuff going on in terms of scoring runs and things, which we're going to get onto now. Speaking of which, Corbin Carroll maybe starting to get a little bit out of his hitting slump now. He's averaging been kind of the low point ones, 0.2s. Season average right now is about 0.191, whereas he was 0.530 yesterday. So, maybe starting to see a little bit of that improvement. I think he could do with a bit more help from some umpires. There was a very handy heat map of the strike zone of a strikeout of his. I think it was in the Rockies series that somebody posted on Twitter or something, where basically all 3 of the pitches that had been called strikes were way over the top of the strike zone, and all 3 got called 1, 2, 3, quite straight strikeout, and he's not swinging at them. Like, how is he supposed to hit that? It's kind of shoulder height, and they've been called strikes. So maybe a little more help from the umpires would kind of help Corbin push on for this slump. But we are calling it sort of the sophomore slump. My mother-in-law's very quick to point out, the old baseball cliches about that. The sophomore slump, especially after being Rookie of the Year last year in the NL, he'll do okay. Corbin will get his swing back. I think he's not a guy that you can always look at as he'll be the guy carrying the team. If he can start drawing a few more walks, it'll sort of cover up the holes in the fact he's not slugging kind of somehow we're used to. He's overcome this shoulder injury over the winter as well. So Corbin will get there. I'm going to choose to have faith in Corbin. But when it comes to hitting, there's more going on than we think there. He got kind of a good crucial hit in, and yesterday probably should have driven in a run. Gabby Moreno didn't quite get the communication right. He was looking over his shoulder as he as he rounded second, kind of half jogging, stopping, starting. Probably should have made it home, but came into third off a Corbin Carroll double, and everyone's wondering why he didn't score. And Corbin's hit it really kind of deep out to like center right field. It's dropped in over the top of the outfielder there. It's kind of gone over his head, and he's had to run after it and turn and throw. And Gabby really should have scored there. So I think you look at Corbin's stats from yesterday, and he should have at least one RBI in there. But he got a hit. He got a good hit as well, and I think that'll probably do him the absolute world of confidence. But if we're going to talk about hitting, I think today we've got to talk about Christian Walker. He was kind of the standout hitter from yesterday's game, or so C Walker, as people are calling him, B Walk, given this insectoid nature of all of the headlines floating around after that Dodgers game. He's slugging again. Yesterday it was 3 for 5. His 2 home runs, which take him to 7 for the year, 3 RBI, and it's his first multi-hit home run game of the year. So it was good to see, Christian Walker getting in there and in the Serpientes uniform as well, which always looks good. We're 2-0 in the Serpientes uniform this year, so maybe that should just be our uniform, at home all the time. I'm not going to get into the whole Fanatics versus Nike uniform debate. I agree with most of the people who say the Fanatics uniforms, especially the shinier ones when they're in a lighter color, kind of look a bit cheap. The lettering doesn't look right. It's not quite what you want your baseball jersey to be. I have one of the original old pinstripe purple and white jerseys back in Arizona, and it's heavy. You feel the embroidering and the lettering; it's significant. So I think I'm just going to add my voice to the chorus of people all telling the MLB get rid of Fanatics, or at the very least get rid of Fanatics, providing the jerseys, and let's get back to the sort of thing that we all know is cool, the stuff we expect. And I think, as much as I don't like to talk about the Texas Rangers because I still have a grudge about the World Series last year, like you can see the difference when the uniform template's been carried over. With the Serpientes uniform as well, it's the same thing for the D-backs. It's very glossy. It looks almost plastic. It looks very cheap. It's the sort of thing that you would order online from AliExpress or something like that, and it comes printed on a very cheap synthetic shirt, as opposed to the very strong, slightly rough fibers we're used to seeing. And if you're going to charge somebody like $120 for a jersey, the least you could do is make sure that it actually stays in one piece and you can actually get lettering embroidered and stitched on. But it doesn't, you don't notice it as much with the D-backs new unis this year. I still think we should be going back purple, teal, pinstriping, all of that jazz, but I think enough people are saying it. I'm sure the D-backs franchise managers or head office or whoever it is knows that and is just refusing to listen to it. So we're not going to flog that horse anymore. Let's get back to talking about baseball. Let's talk Christian Walker. So everyone knows kind of 2023 was a weird year for C-Walk. It was a kind of balance. He was hitting a lot, perhaps a bit more effectively, but, was producing a lot less when it came to being the power bat. And he really was the power bat in the D-backs lineup. There are a few guys in there, Ketel Marte, Evan Longoria was obviously here last year, and then Corbin Carroll was starting to get some big hits in too. And you think, we've got some extra power to support Walker, but Christian Walker's the guy you look to as like, he's the power bat. And everyone likes to say that's them. They're the big slugging danger. But now I think you look at a lot of other guys in this D-backs lineup, especially picking up, Eugenio Suarez, Jock Peterson as well. These are guys who they look the part. They look like proper big sluggers. Suarez has got that very thick-set shoulder frame. Jock Peterson's just a big guy all around. And I think maybe not having that pressure to be like the one big slugger in the lineup is going to do Christian Walker the absolute world of good. And, it's paying off. You take the pressure off him, he's a lot more effective now. He's not the guy that you think, Christian Walker's coming up and he's got to do something. Christian Walker comes up in the lineup and maybe, Corbin Carroll or Gabby Moreno or Ketel Marte are on base. And you think, okay, Lourdes Gurriel Jr. is obviously not really playing that much all the time now. The rotation through this D-backs lineup has been kind of silly. We're obviously missing, your mainstays like your Geraldo Perdomos, and you got Randall Grichuk out there, Kevin Newman, because we're missing Alec Thomas. Jake McCarthy's only just finishing his rehab, so it's a bit of a switch and poke and stick it wherever. But then you think you got Blaze Alexander coming in. How good's he been? Sort of somewhat out of nowhere, but cool name in that number 9 jersey. And he's basically leading us in pretty much every hitting statistic and throughout the whole team, simply because he's been the guy who's playing all the time. He's not succumbed to any of these really big injuries. You're not worried about him not being able to run or not being able to hit as effectively. So having, different kind of guys coming in and hitting, I think that means Christian Walker's maybe feeling a bit better. The pressure's a little more off his shoulders, and he's showing that's good. He's making himself more effective, and that's what we want to see out of him. You're going to get somebody who's going to be able to really hit those big home runs. Two home runs yesterday, one solo, and then 1 2-run homer for the walk-off out into left field into the crowd. That's pretty good. And against the Dodgers, that is going to make him feel a little bit better. So between Corbin getting a bit of a shot in the arm of some confidence there, Christian Walker looking like he's kind of getting back to being the all-round big hit guy that we know he can be, that's only going to bode well for the Diamondbacks. So let's do a little bit of a preview of the game that's going to be going on in the early hours of the morning if you're watching from London. Let's talk Game 3 against the Dodgers. Okay, so let's do a little bit of a preview for Game 3 in the series, shall we? Let's talk, firstly, pitching matchups. We've got expected matchup of Yoshinobu Yamamoto, that big 300 million guy who's come out from the Japanese leagues to sign for the Dodgers. We're talking about a $1 billion payroll for the Dodgers here. And then we've got Jordan Montgomery, who's probably going to get the start for the D-backs today. You got a 3.54 ERA for Yamamoto versus, a 2.77 for Montgomery. So it's not that far off, but it is still a distinction. Obviously, we haven't seen the best of Montgomery yet. He's 1-1. Yamamoto's 2-1. So the records aren't too different either. Montgomery's looked okay. He came in and, very much impressed people in his first start. And everyone's like, oh, yeah, holy crap, we've got, one of the best pitching rotations, And especially at the start of the season, there was a lot of that hype. But I think we have to be a bit more realistic here, especially the fact that if you're going to take a 5-man pitching rotation, and obviously you've got Merrill Kelly and Zach Gallen battling out for that number 1 spot as the ace. Gallen got a little roughed up towards the start of the year. Merrill Kelly's a little bit colder than we're used to, but he's been getting the results. And then you got probably the battle between Montgomery and Erod for the number 3 spot. I think if Erod's fit and throwing the way that we're used to seeing him throw for the Tigers in the last 3 years or so, then I think he'll probably nail down that number 3 spot pretty well. Montgomery's the 4, and then Brandon Pfaadt would be my choice for 5, and I think you wouldn't find too many people who would argue that. Slade Tachoni's making a good kind of name for himself, but I don't think he's there yet. We'll see, because he'll be part of the rotation for a little while now. We'll have to see how that goes, but if that rotation is all pitching the way we know they can, then I think, yes, you have a good case to say, yeah, it's the strongest 5-man pitching rotation. I'd say at least, well, certainly in the NL West, but you could probably argue the NL. Arguing like the full MLB is probably a little harder. I think you got to look at, teams like, the Yankees, you got to look at the Braves, and you just think, well, these are guys who have good pitchers all around. You got to look at, Padres as well. You got to look at Giants and think, okay, they've got 1 or 2 guys, the 3 and 4 are like, okay, and then they seem to have these random number 5 guys that pop up, especially when they're playing the T-backs, and all of a sudden, like, who the heck's that guy? I never heard of him, and then he strikes out like 9 batters out of 10 faced or something like that. So we really have to be careful when making big little statements like that. But, if Montgomery can pitch well tonight, especially against the Dodgers, I think this is his first major test since we brought him in, and There's been all this talk about the fact that he's switching agents, he's switching representation because he wasn't happy with the fact he only got a 1-year deal out of us, and he probably wanted to go somewhere for like a 2 or 3-year deal and get more money out of it. So whether or not he's happy where he is, the fact that he's pitching for us, it doesn't really matter. I'd rather have him pitching for us than against us. Clearly, there's still a lot left in his locker and his tank, so we'll see how that works out. But today's the first kind of really big test, and D-backs currently 14-17. I think if we can get it back to .500, then we'll be okay. But that's gonna take a lot. We got a game against the Dodgers coming up. We've still got some of the really top teams left to play. We haven't played too many of the really tough interleague matches yet. So yeah, we've got to really make sure we focus on getting what we can out of the easier games, because with all these injuries going on, this is not a D-backs team that's going to be capable of blowing people away and getting into the postseason like it's nothing. We're not chasing the Dodgers for second place in the NL West this year. Both the Padres and the Giants have had really strong recruitment in the offseason. Blake Snell's someone we have to worry about. These are names that, maybe we could have gone after too, but we recruited okay. I think once again we've somewhat had a bit of a steal going in, getting Suarez from the Mariners. You got a feel for Mariners fans now. We ripped off Paul Sewald off of them. They got Josh Rojas, and he did okay actually in this series against the D-backs. He hit a kind of solo home run in, I think it was game 1 against the D-backs, and you think, oh Lord, here we go, ex D-back coming playing against us, doing great. But you got to be happy for him. He's a guy who gave a lot to this franchise, so we've got to say, just hope he does okay there. But yeah, I was talking to a Mariners fan at the MLB UK meetup a couple of weeks ago, and they're saying, they're still a little bitter about us getting all those good trades out of them. So fair play to Mariners fans. But then the future of that organization is pretty okay. If you're a British baseball fan, the name Harry Ford probably means something to you. Out in Double A at the moment with the Arkansas Travelers, catching prospect, big hits, kind of big personality, gets the job done. So, the Mariners will do okay. They've got some good prospects coming through that organization, and of course they still have Julio Rodriguez, so it's not like they've lost the big star. But yeah, back to D-backs baseball. All of a sudden, this isn't a Seattle podcast. Yeah, got to do the easy stuff first. I'm not going to go ahead and just say, oh yeah, well, I can guarantee you we'll beat the Rockies and then we just have to beat everybody else. Like the Rockies, they're still an all right baseball team. They were beating up on, I think the Marlins this week. So, they're doing something. Was it the Marlins or was it the Rays? I don't remember. But, let's just make sure we're respecting everyone here. But yeah, Game 3 against the Dodgers coming up. Pretty short while now. Focus on what we can do. You've got to really get behind the team. If you're one of the guys lucky enough to be going to Chase Field as a D-backs fan, there's always going to be so many people in Dodgers jerseys at Chase Field, especially now that Shohei's there and all these legions of fans just piling around the country following him. Like everyone wants to see him play, and some people try to get spring training tickets in Arizona just to see Shohei, even though they're D-backs fans or Padres fans or really anything really. I've seen actually quite a few Phillies jerseys floating around. We're just here to see Shohei. I get it, it's cool, but this guy's been in the major leagues for a few years now. It's not like he's an unknown. You could have gone to Angels Stadium, seen him play for the Angels in Anaheim, and you didn't. The fact that he's playing for the Dodgers now, I think a lot's being made out of it, and I was never really one of those guys that oh yeah, Shohei's going to come play in Arizona, because I just didn't think that was realistic. But honestly, I feel like it would have been better for baseball in at least a Puritan sense if he'd have gone to the Blue Jays instead of the Dodgers. But the Dodgers can throw $1 billion at a roster now, and that's nothing. And baseball really should be thinking about a salary cap. But back to my original point, yeah, D-backs fans, go in there, get as loud as you can. You got to drown out those fans in the blue and white there today. Really, really got to make Chase Field into a bit of a bear pit, because this is a team that's in a little bit of a slump. It needs all the help we can give it. It's been a rough it's been a rough month actually for fans of sports in Phoenix. The Suns have had a little bit of a capitulation. Obviously the Coyotes are moving. So sports in the Valley is kind of having a rough time of it. So this D-backs franchise is really going to have to carry the area as a whole. So let's make sure we get behind them. And I think that's probably a good note to sign off on. So I'm just going to go ahead and say thank you very much for listening. As always, this is the T-Backs Podcast, Arizona's #1 baseball and beverage podcast. I am your host, Benji, aka GB Diamondback, and I'll see you on the next episode. Thanks for listening. Goodbye.